I curled my fingers around the handle of the coffee pot, the smooth ceramic warm against my palm. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the boardroom, blending with the crisp sterility of expensive cologne and polished oak. This wasn't my place. Or rather, it wasn't supposed to be my place. Be careful not to spill, Margaret Caldwell sneered, adjusting the collar of her ill-fitted knockoff designer blazer. Her cold blue eyes flicked over me with barely concealed disdain. We wouldn't want you embarrassing the family more than you already do. Laughter rippled around the conference table. Soft knowing chuckles. Except for one person, Ryan, my husband. He sat at the far end of the table, hunched over his laptop, his fingers unmoving on the keyboard. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He never did in moments like these. After 5 years of marriage, he had mastered the art of silent complicity, a skill he wielded with the precision of a coward. I poured the coffee steadily, my hands unwavering. I had held billion-dollar negotiations without breaking a sweat. I had sat across from Fortune 500 CEOs who mistook my youth for inexperience, only to watch their expressions morph from arrogance to unease when they realized who I was. But here in this room in my husband's family's business, I was nothing more than the coffee girl. Margaret didn't even look at me as she continued speaking. Our CEO will be here any minute, she announced with exaggerated importance. We need to appear professional. I bit back a smirk. Oh, Margaret. If only you knew. The so-called acquisition offer was nothing but a carefully orchestrated trap. For months my company, Novatech, had been quietly buying up shares of Caldwell Industries, methodically tightening its grip like a python around its prey. Today wasn't just another business meeting. Today was the day I watched them choke. But not yet. I set a cup in front of Daniel Park, the official CEO of Novatech. He glanced up, momentarily startled, before quickly masking his reaction. Only someone who knew the truth could see the flicker of recognition behind his professional facade. Cream and sugar? I asked smoothly. He hesitated, then played along. Black, please. Thank you. Margaret practically shoved me aside in her eagerness to address him. Mr. Park, it's an honor to have you here. Please ignore my daughter-in-law. She's just helping out since we couldn't get proper catering today. Daniel's brow lifted ever so slightly. Ah, so that was the narrative. Margaret heaved a dramatic sigh. Unfortunately, she is my son's wife. I slipped into the corner, pulling out my phone. Time to set things in motion. I typed a quick message to Daniel. Envelope with arrow, play along. You'll understand soon. His phone vibrated on the table. A subtle nod told me he had received it. Margaret launched into her usual monologue, spinning tales of proud family legacy and market strength, while conveniently omitting their plummeting sales and pending bankruptcy. I had reviewed the real figures. Without intervention, Caldwell Industries wouldn't last another quarter, and I had no intention of letting it survive. The sound of clinking silverware and low conversation filled the grand dining hall of the Caldwell estate. The air smelled of rosemary and slow-roasted lamb, the kind of decadence that only served to mask the rot beneath. It was Christmas Eve 5 years ago. I was still naive then. Still foolish enough to believe that marriage meant partnership. I had spent the evening listening to Margaret praise Ryan's future as CEO. We're finally handing the company over to him next year, she had said, dabbing her mouth with a linen napkin. It's about time the business stays within the real family. Her words had been aimed at me like a bullet between the ribs. I had swallowed my frustration and for the first time had offered to help. I have experience in corporate finance, I had said cautiously. I could take a look at the company's structure, help improve. Margaret's wine glass clinked against the table as she set it down with a sharp laugh. You? Oh honey, that's adorable. The room had gone uncomfortably silent. Ryan had kept his gaze locked on his plate, cutting his lamb into unnecessarily small pieces. I have an MBA from Stanford, I had continued, feeling heat creep up my neck. Margaret smirked. And I have a Pilates instructor with a certificate in holistic nutrition, but that doesn't mean she should run a Michelin-starred restaurant. Laughter. Dismissive, sharp. Ryan hadn't said a word. I had turned to him, searching his face for some kind of defense, some sign that he would, at the very least, acknowledge me. He had simply reached for his wine glass. And then Margaret had delivered the final blow. You should focus on things that suit women, Lauren. Like planning dinner parties or picking out nursery colors for when you finally give me a grandchild. The air had sucked out of my lungs. I had gripped the stem of my own wine glass, my knuckles turning white. I had spent the rest of that dinner suffocating under their laughter, the taste of expensive wine turning bitter on my tongue. And in that moment I had made a decision. I wouldn't fight for their respect. I would take everything they had. Back to the present. I looked down at my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. Envelope with arrow sent. Play along. You'll understand soon. Margaret was still speaking, still weaving her web of delusions. And I smiled. Because tonight, she would choke on her own words. Margaret droned on about market growth projections and legacy building, conveniently ignoring the financial cliff her company was teetering on. I leaned against the cool mahogany wall, watching her spin lies with the ease of a seasoned politician. She still thought she was in control. Ryan sat beside her, nodding when appropriate, his fingers tapping mindlessly against the table. His face betrayed nothing. Just the perfect image of a golden boy groomed for leadership. The truth? He was a placeholder. A name on paper. A man who had never made a single executive decision in his life. Daniel, sitting at the other end of the table, gave me a quick glance before clearing his throat. Perhaps we should first review Caldwell Industries' actual standing before discussing the acquisition terms. Margaret's lips pursed. There's no need for that. We're well aware of our company's strengths. I typed another message on my phone. Envelope with arrow sent. Time to push her. Daniel adjusted his tie and leaned forward, flipping open a folder. With all due respect, I think it's crucial. Based on Novatech's analysis, your quarterly earnings have declined by 32% in the past year. Your largest contracts were either terminated or transferred elsewhere. And according to these reports, you're projected to be insolvent within 6 months. A beat of silence. Margaret's expression faltered for half a second before she forced a thin smile. That's exaggerated. These numbers don't reflect our internal. Daniel slid a thick stack of printed documents across the table. These are filings directly from your financial department, he said smoothly. Unless, of course, your accountants are also exaggerating. Ryan snatched up the papers, scanning them with furrowed brows. I could see the realization sinking in. He hadn't read a single report in months. Margaret scoffed. We'll recover. Once Ryan steps in as CEO next month, we're expecting exponential growth. I couldn't hold back my laughter. It slipped past my lips, low and amused, cutting through the tense air like a blade. Margaret snapped her head toward me, eyes narrowing. Something funny, Lauren? I met her gaze. Just that word. Exponential. It's an interesting choice, considering the only thing multiplying in your company is debt. The room tensed. I pushed off the wall, adjusting my watch. It's fascinating, I continued, how you still think you're in control of this company. Margaret sat up straighter. What are you implying? I smiled. Finally, it was time. I turned to Daniel. You can tell them now. Daniel leaned back in his chair, an easy grin playing at his lips. Of course, Madam CEO. Silence. Absolute silence. Margaret's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor. Ryan paled, looking between me and Daniel like the two of us had just spoken in a foreign language. What the hell are you talking about? I stepped forward, placing a folder in front of them. Perhaps we should clarify who's actually acquiring whom. Ryan snatched the papers, flipping through them in growing horror. Novatech Industries, my company, currently owns 48% of Caldwell Industries. Today, we're here to purchase the remaining 52%. Ryan grabbed the folder and flipped through it, his fingers tightening around the edges of the paper as realization dawned. This isn't possible, he muttered. We would have known. I leaned forward, my voice smooth. Would you? Margaret snatched the documents from Ryan's hands, her eyes darting over the pages. The room was so silent that I could hear her shallow breathing as she processed what she was seeing. I don't understand, she whispered. How the hell did this happen? I slid another file toward her, tapping my manicured finger against the header. These are records of the shell companies that have been purchasing Caldwell stock for the past 8 months. I explained, my tone calm. Of course you wouldn't have known, because you never bothered to look. Margaret's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Ryan, on the other hand, turned red with fury. You spied on us? He accused. I laughed. Spied? No, Ryan. I did what you should have done. I conducted due diligence. I warned you about this last year. But you ignored every report I gave you. I cocked my head. Or maybe it's because Mommy told you I was just meddling. Ryan slammed the folder onto the table. This isn't over. Oh, it is, I countered smoothly. And before you start threatening lawsuits, let me remind you of something. I pulled out one last document, a copy of our prenup. Ryan's face twisted in confusion at first. Then as he skimmed the fine print, his entire body went rigid. Ah, there it is, I mused. The moment you realize you're truly screwed. Margaret snatched the document from his hands. What is this? It's the contract you insisted I sign before I married your son, I said, my voice dripping with amusement. Do you remember, Margaret? You wanted to protect the family's wealth in case I ever got too greedy. Her hands trembled as she scanned the clauses and then she froze. I leaned in. And look at this little section, right there under public image clauses. Ryan's breathing had turned shallow. Ryan, I said sweetly, if you publicly disparage me, you forfeit any and all financial claims in the event of divorce. You also void your inheritance. Ryan's face drained of color. Margaret let out a choke sound. You signed this, she hissed at her son. He said nothing. I crossed my arms. Ironic, isn't it? The very clause you forced me to sign is now the one thing keeping me untouchable. The weight of their downfall settled over them like a crushing force. Margaret collapsed back into her chair. Ryan looked like he was going to be sick. I smiled. It's over, I said softly. You just haven't accepted it yet. As I walked out of the boardroom, leaving behind the wreckage of the Caldwell legacy, my phone buzzed. Envelope with arrow from Robert Caldwell, Ryan's father. You outplayed us all. I should have listened to you 5 years ago. The company's yours now. Just take care of our employees. I let out a breath. At least one of them understood. But the day wasn't over yet. Because Margaret Caldwell wasn't a woman who went down quietly. 3 days later, she showed up at my office uninvited. She wasn't the same woman I had first met years ago, the one who had dismissed me with condescending smirks and a tilt of her wine glass. No, the Margaret sitting across from me now was desperate. I sold my house, she admitted suddenly, breaking the silence. I blinked. The estate. She nodded stiffly. Turns out, maintaining appearances is expensive when you can't siphon money from a company anymore. I tilted my head. How poetic. Margaret Caldwell, once a pillar of high society, was now just another woman scrambling to hold on to her past. She stared at me, her voice quieter now. How did you do it? She asked, her tone almost genuine. All those years. Serving coffee. Enduring our insults. Why didn't you just tell us who you were? I studied her, considering my words carefully. Would you have believed me? I asked. Or would you have pushed Ryan to divorce me and marry someone more suitable? She said nothing. That was answer enough. I stood, signaling the conversation was over. I saved everything, Margaret. Your employees, the ones you pretended to care about, were about to lose their jobs. I didn't take this company from you. I rescued it from your mismanagement. She let out a slow breath. And Ryan. I met her gaze. Ryan made his choice every single time he sat silently while you belittled me. Margaret was quiet for a long time. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of my office. She didn't look back. Margaret Caldwell did not go down without a fight. 3 days after the takeover, she stormed into my office without an appointment, something she had never allowed me to do in her domain. She looked different. Not the poised, sneering woman who once held court at dinner parties, but a queen without a throne. Her perfectly styled blonde hair was slightly out of place. Her pearls sat awkwardly against a blazer that no longer carried the same weight of power. I didn't look up from my laptop. Security let you in? I asked flatly. They wouldn't dare stop me, she snapped, dropping her designer handbag onto my desk as if she still had the authority to make demands. I sighed and shut my laptop, leaning back in my chair. Margaret, I'm a busy woman. I assume you didn't come here to congratulate me. She scoffed. Don't flatter yourself. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached into her bag, pulling out a thick folder. You may have taken control, but I still have connections. There are people who will back me. Former shareholders, private investors, people who know what's best for this company. I stared at her for a moment, then slowly reached forward and took the folder. I flipped through it, pretending to skim the documents inside. Then I burst out laughing. Margaret's face flushed. What the hell is so funny? I tossed the folder back onto the desk. You think these people will help you? I shook my head, chuckling. They already sold their shares to me, Margaret. You have no leverage. No power. Just a sinking reputation and a bruised ego. Her lips pressed into a thin line. You. I what? I leaned in, voice soft but deadly. Took what was mine? Beat you at your own game? Margaret, I did exactly what you would have done if you had been smart enough to see it coming. Her nostrils flared, but for the first time, I saw something real in her eyes. Defeat. I sold my house, she admitted suddenly. I raised an eyebrow. The estate. She nodded stiffly. Turns out, maintaining appearances is expensive when you can't siphon money from a company anymore. I let out a slow exhale. How poetic. Margaret Caldwell, once a pillar of high society, was now just another woman scrambling to hold on to her past. She stared at me, and for the first time in years her voice lost its edge. How did you do it? She whispered. All those years. Serving coffee. Enduring our insults. Why didn't you just tell us who you were? I tilted my head, studying her. Would you have believed me? I asked. Or would you have pushed Ryan to divorce me and marry someone more suitable? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I stood up, signaling the conversation was over. I saved everything, Margaret. Your employees, the ones you pretended to care about, were about to lose their jobs. I didn't take this company from you. I rescued it from your mismanagement. She swallowed hard. And Ryan. I met her gaze. Ryan made his choice every single time he sat silently while you belittled me. Margaret was quiet for a long time. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of my office. She didn't look back. 1 year after the takeover, I stood on a stage, addressing the employees of what was once Caldwell Industries. Now it was Carter Tech. The company had doubled in value, our stock price had skyrocketed, and our expansion into 3 new markets had secured our place in the industry. The toxic culture of nepotism and favoritism was gone. Instead, we had built a company that valued merit, innovation, and leadership, a company I was proud to run. I looked out over the crowd of employees, some old, some new, but all of them watching me with trust, not resentment. Last year, I said into the microphone, someone told me I was just the coffee girl. A ripple of laughter moved through the audience. I smiled. Today I want to thank them. Because sometimes, being underestimated is the greatest advantage of all. Thunderous applause erupted, and as I stepped down from the stage, I felt a deep, satisfying sense of finality. I had done it. Not just taken my revenge, but rebuilt something better. That evening, as I was finishing up some reports in my office, my assistant knocked on the door. There's someone here to see you, she said hesitantly. I looked up. Who? She shifted uncomfortably. Melissa Jameson. I blinked. Melissa? Margaret's former choice for Ryan's real wife. I sat back, intrigued. Send her in. Melissa entered, looking nothing like the polished, poised socialite Margaret had once paraded around. She was dressed professionally, but there was an air of humility to her now. I gestured to the chair across from me. Melissa, this is a surprise. She sat down carefully, folding her hands in her lap. I heard you were hiring for a management position, she said. I know this is awkward given everything, but I have an MBA from Harvard. And unlike Ryan, I actually earned it myself. I studied her. Interesting. You know what the hardest part of success is, Melissa? I said finally. She shook her head. I smiled, remembering to give others the chance you wish someone had given you. I extended my hand. Let's talk about your qualifications. Melissa let out a relieved breath and shook my hand. 2 years after the takeover, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Ryan Caldwell was getting married. To a real estate agent. Someone far removed from the corporate world that Margaret had once envisioned for him. Attached to the invitation was a small box. I opened it and let out a genuine laugh. Inside was a coffee maker, along with a note, envelope with arrow from Ryan Caldwell. Some people serve coffee. Others build empires. For the first time in years, I felt something close to respect for him. He had finally learned the lesson. Every morning as I walked into Cartertech's headquarters, I would pass by the company motto engraved on the lobby wall. It was a reminder of where I started, of where they tried to keep me, and of where I had risen to. Success is served best with a side of humble beginnings. I smiled every time I saw it, because I was never just the coffee girl. I was the woman who built an empire.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for updates on new videos. See you next time.